Okay, I'd like to call to order the City Council of the City of East Lansing discussion-only meeting for Tuesday, October 8th, 2024. Could we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Altmann.
Here.
Councilmember Meadows. Councilmember Watson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Singh.
Here.
Mayor Brookover.
Here. Dr. Altmann, do you have a motion with regard to Mr. Meadows?
Yes, I would like to move to excuse Mr. Meadows' absence.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the motion passes unanimously. Could we have a motion for approval of the agenda, please?
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Altmann, second by
Second. Dana.
by Dr. Watson, Dana Watson, Dr. Watson, I presume. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, the agenda motion is approved unanimously. Communications from the audience, I have two slips, one from Heather Douglas.
Hi, I'm here to talk to you a bit about the BWL rate hike and the discussion. I know they're here tonight to do a presentation. I sent you an email about that last night, and I wanted to say a little bit about what was in that email. My concerns primarily are regarding the reasons for the rate hikes and the governance of the Lansing Board and Water of Light. There has been little transparency about what the rate hikes are actually needed for specifically, what the money is going to go to specifically. You might have noticed a dearth of details in the materials that was sent to you by BWL. I'm hoping they'll provide more tonight. It's clear that there's money needed for new energy infrastructure as demand is going to rise. But the BWL has been quite opaque, not just the material sent to you, but also at the BWL board public hearing on the rate hikes in August about what specifically the rate hikes are actually for. One of the big ticket items so far discussed in the media has been the reciprocating engine, reciprocating internal combustion engine, which would be burning natural gas, which is of course a fossil fuel, which means it will have to be phased out by 2040 by state law without carbon capture. With carbon capture, it will be way too expensive. Currently, in the BWL's air permit application, they suggested that instituting carbon capture would double the price tag of the Rice plant. And although people have been working very hard on making carbon capture and storage feasible for the last 20 years, the needle has not been moving very well on that. So we need renewables and storage. BWL does have plans for that, but so far they're investing much less than the $170 million in the Rice plant, which brings us back to the rate hikes and what they're actually for. What I'm hoping the East Lansing City Council will consider is that additional oversight is needed for rate hikes that are imposed on East Lansing residents. Currently, there is no voting board member from East Lansing on the commission. And this is a problem, given that it is a monopoly. So whether or not we can reinstitute perhaps MPSC oversight for rate hikes for East Lansing residents, as was in the initial agreement with the Board of Water and Light from 2017, or some other mechanism, something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Daphne O'Regan.
Hello. You've received quite a few letters from me and some communications about noise. And most recently, I was not in time to talk to you at your previous meeting about my analysis of your proposed ordinance. First of all, I want to apologize to all black and brown people who are either afraid of pretextual stops or have experienced them. I totally agree that they're horrible and should not be tolerated. With that said, the proposed ordinance is both too broad and too narrow to be effective at maintaining public health and preventing pretextual stops. It's too narrow because many pretextual stops are based on a very slight infraction of speed limits, which is not covered by the ordinance. It's too broad because it captures public health problems implied in excessive noise. Excessive noise has been recognized as a public health problem since at least 2006. I went on to the National Institutes of Health website, which everyone here could do too, and I looked at the various literatures that were there, and I discovered, cardiac problems, inflammation, of course, deafness, difficulty for people who are neurologically diverse, etc., are all associated, anxiety, stress, because it activates your amygdala, etc., are all associated with noise. Whether or not the noise even bothers you, because your body can have a reaction regardless of your conscious intentions. Okay, so if public health is implicated in the noise ordinance, why is it still there? I don't know, because I watched the council decide not to include one burnt out headlight in the ordinance on the basis of public health. And yet it's clear that a burnt out headlight can be the cause of inadvertence, and it can also be a poverty crime. In other words, people can't afford to figure out how to fix their headlights and are incapable of doing it themselves because nobody can fix anything on a car anymore. So I am totally against criminalizing poverty, so I would recommend that we continue with all of the ordinance as written, except noise. That should be removed from the ordinance because it's a public health problem. Now, there may be people, as I've told you and written you, who have genuinely broken mufflers and cannot afford to fix them. Okay, East Lansing can pick up the bill for that. We will have revenue from other people who have spent thousands of dollars putting in noise-enhancing mufflers, and in the case of electric cars, noise-enhancing electronic systems that they can just activate. It's particularly important that the noise ordinance include cars during the night because of obviously the health impacts of excessive noise are exaggerated during the night. And I want to tell you about my experiences in other states. I spend a significant amount of time in Berkeley, California, where sideshows, if you're familiar with what that is, it means a bunch of people getting together and driving very dangerously and keeping other people off the road and having spectators and all that, were very, very prevalent and of course attended by a huge amount of noise and exhaust. And there was a lot of noise. California, as a state, passed a law about noise, the fine. I'm not endorsing this, I'm merely pointing out that East Lansing is not alone in this, is $1,000. Likewise, New York has passed such laws, Connecticut and probably a lot of other states, but I just stopped. By using the Ann Arbor ordinance, East Lansing is running afoul of the emerging trend both nationally and internationally to recognize noise as a public health problem that needs to be addressed. There's quite a bit of activity in the EU as well. It's particularly important, of course,
You have 30 seconds remaining.
Okay, so I was informed that the problem is revenue. We don't have enough money to enforce this if we should make, or we don't have the capability of enforcing it, and I find that difficult to believe when I'm all for the Great Lakes Festival, I love it, but if we're proposing funding those things, I think we should take a good close look at public health first.
Thank you for your input. We have anybody in the queue?
We have one caller in the queue.
Please.
Caller with a number ending 954, you're welcome to address council.
Hello. This is Nicole River calling from East Lansing. I'd like to also discuss the BWL presentation and concerning the rate hike. Looking through what was included with the agenda materials, pretty interesting to see them uplifting the renewables in this public presentation and in a lot of their sort of forward-facing communications. And yet the rice plant is getting the lion's share of money, and that is, as Heather pointed out, fossil fuel infrastructure, newly built. And so this raises some red flags, because when talking about clean energy and renewables, I see that included on that is biomass and landfill and things like carbon capture. Well, carbon capture is kind of this wishful thinking technology currently, and interestingly, somehow never gets to including trees and living things and that, do a very good job of capturing carbon. It seems like a lot of the discussions about energy and renewables and mitigating climate change in general seem to fall into this trap of what's able to be monetized and what is in alignment with sort of the already established big industry approach. One would think a public utility would enable us to sort of shake ourselves free of that thinking and be a real opportunity and a forerunner and a model of how to actually meet some of these goals without kind of finding a way to have it be more about public perception by saying renewables and yet again spending far more money on new gas infrastructure. As for biomass and things like landfill or biomethane capture, again, those have to do with gas and therefore burning fuels again. So why has the rice plant approval process been so obfuscated? It does not engender trust in the processes. And so I would certainly encourage East Lansing City Council as elected officials who hopefully are able to be listened to and can expect more of a fulsome response from the BWL to really push on more details of how these decisions about spending monies from the people have been come to. And I really like Heather's idea of there should be a voting voice for East Lansing because we are part of what's supposed to be a cooperative approach to our energy. And as we have 2 storms within the course of 2 weeks that have displaced many people and have shocked experts at the strength and the unexpected toil, we can't just have wishful thinking about carbon capture and saying, hey, one more natural gas plant. The investment needs to be in actual renewables. So I hope you'll use your power to demand clear answers and accountability. Be much.
Thank you for your input. Anybody else in the queue?
No other callers in the queue.
Okay, we'll move ahead with the agenda then. Communication from council members. Dr. Altmann.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to address the issue of loud exhaust from cars. We've gotten a lot of emails about this in the last couple of days. I think that was in reaction to the first reading of Ordinance 1541, which the speaker mentioned earlier. I agree with the speaker that the loud exhaust provision in that ordinance is a step in the wrong direction. I did try to remove it, but my amendment failed. This issue has been on the council's radar since, I think, 2021 at least. And council hasn't really acted to do anything about it. And now our first action is going to be to make loud exhaust more difficult to enforce. So I think we need a plan because this is a public health issue. I hope we don't need to belabor that point. So I would like to ask that we have this as a discussion-only agenda item as soon as possible so that we can learn, among other things, what are the impediments to enforcement, what are the options for enforcement. I don't know that we need more data on the problem itself. I think we need to plan how to address it and whether the impediments are from the policing angle or the prosecution angle or the legal angle. I think we need to do some planning. And we have shown that we can respond to problems in the community with how we reacted to the flooding events of June and July. And I think it's time that we did this with loud car exhaust too, because it's a big problem and people are angry and frustrated. Thank you.
Councilmember Watson?
I was listening to the news the other day, and I just wanted to uplift that with efforts such as Advance Peace, we're seeing a reduction in gun violence, and this is reported from the City of Lansing as well as the City of Jackson. And we have multiple discussions about the City of East Lansing. We don't exist in a bubble, and so that was great to see that thinking about solving gun violence issues from multiple angles is something that definitely works. And so I just wanted to uplift that piece. Sometimes people think we've got more guns in the community or there's more gun violence happening than there is. And the next thing I wanted to point out is in 2020, the City of East Lansing, along with the county, along with the state, along with numerous other entities across the nation, declared racism as a public health crisis. And what you see in those resolutions is mentions of the criminal justice system and the failure of racial inequities in policing. And so while we think the council is considering stopping something regarding our health and noise, what's happening is we are recognizing, and I'm asking people to recognize the inequities that exist when you are able to do pretextual stops and how it's landed in the laps of certain individuals and not others. And I encourage everyone, when you are thinking about equitable systems, you also have to ask yourself, what are you willing to give up because you've been a benefactor or you've had the privilege? So what does it mean that I want to live in peace, but my neighbor next door has a loud exhaust, a broken muffler? Does it mean I do unneighborly things like call the police on them? Or do I let them work it out? Because yeah, I want peace, but also an equitable system doesn't come for people of certain races or ethnicities or socioeconomic factors. And that's what we're thinking about here. Now, as far as noise goes, I live around renters, which is students, and they play loud music, and I visit them, and I remind them of the noise ordinance. So again, it's not a loud car that's driving by my house, it's loud music, and sometimes not into the night because I would address that. But we have a noise ordinance in place with regards to things like that. But I do think, as everyone's bringing up the issues with noise, gas-powered leaf blowers, that is something that communities, I think including California, have done away with. Those are loud and they bother people, and it's gas-powered. And so definitely, as we're considering what we're doing or not doing with regards to noise, I absolutely want to consider what gas-powered leaf blowers and how they're problematic for people in the community as well, because again, they're loud and they go on and they're gas-powered. And the last thing, speaking of leaves, that I wanted to mention is we go back and forth in conversations about leaving the leaves or the importance of raking our leaves. And sometimes it's my understanding in certain neighborhoods and certain locations, it's important that the leaves are gathered because of the sewer systems around. But then in other areas, I don't know how to explain it, if it's larger backyards or backyards that aren't clunking up the sewer systems, the possibility is there where you can leave the leaves, help the animals and the insects and nature. And so I just want to encourage you all to think about leaving the leaves as well as raking your leaves. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
Not this evening, thank you.
I have nothing. Mr. City Manager, do you have any communications for us tonight?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move along with discussion items. Item 6.1, discussion of Board of Water and Light rate increase. Sir. Thanks for coming tonight, Mr. Peffley. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Good evening. And I am, for the record, Dick Peffley, General Manager of the Lansing Board of Water and Light, and I am accompanied tonight by Heather Shaw, our CFO, who is behind me, and Brina Pugh, our Government Relations Manager. And I brought subject matter experts, Kelly Christensen and Scott Taylor, who will be doing a brief presentation of the full presentation that was done for the public and the Board of Commissioners regarding the rate hike. The presentation is shorter, but I think that'll give us a lot more time to answer questions that you're interested in instead of going over items internally that you may not be interested in. But I'm going to turn it over to them. They can do their formal introductions, but our intent is to be able, with this group, to provide all the answers to questions you may have tonight, right now. Thank you.
Next slide.
Next slide. And then one more, please. So, just introduce myself, Scott Taylor, Director of Accounting, Finance, and Planning at the Board of Water and Light. As you may have already heard, and we'll talk a little bit more about tonight in detail, the two primary drivers that we've explained for our rate increases are inflationary pressures as well as energy investments. I'll focus a little bit more on inflationary pressures and where we're seeing those, and Kelly will walk through our investments in energy with you. This slide shows our reliability. Customer surveys year in and year out show that reliability is one of the priorities of our customers, so we continue to invest there. In this chart, you can see we continue to remain one of the top performing utilities in the state for reliability. It also shows that the indices of our nearest competitors, it's kind of hard to see towards the bottom, but if you have a copy, you may be able to see our nearest competitors' indices is over 5 times as high as ours for reliability. You may be aware also the Michigan Public Service Commission recently issued a report also supporting the fact that the BWL is a leader in reliability over other competitors within the state. So we continue to invest here because it's a priority for our customers. And this is subject to inflation, various materials, transformers, things that we invest in. We've seen significant inflation. And I'll talk a little bit more about that impact in some of the later slides. Next slide, please. This takes some of our costs and breaks them into a few different categories. Our purchase power and fuel, we have some protection from inflation. Our purchase power agreements are generally longer term, so we have some protection there. In our fuel, we have hedging strategies that we can use to manage those costs. But the other areas, labor, material, other outside service, those have all been subject to significant inflation in recent years. So another thing to note, though, is we do aggressively seek external funding. Just in the last 2 to 3 years, we've been awarded over $80 million in grant funding that we've pursued for different investments in our system to help manage our costs. In addition to that, we're funding our projects in a manner that we expect to receive nearly $30 million in tax credits associated with our solar investments. So we are doing what we can to pursue external funding sources that don't need to come through rate changes. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates that over time we have been very successful in keeping our rate increases below the overall inflation rate. We've been able to do this because rate increases are not the first place we look when we try to balance our budget each year. We first look at operational efficiencies and continually to challenge ourselves to spend strategically and for cost management. Only after we've exhausted all of those discussions do we start to look at other means for balancing. So that's one of the reasons why over time we've been able to stay below the general inflation rate. I do want to highlight the blue line is the general inflation rate. I'll talk a little bit more about this in a few slides. But you'll see a very steep increase in recent years, especially in 22 and 23 in the general inflation rates. That's one of the things that have been impacting us most significantly. I'll turn it over to Kelly to talk about some energy, and then I'll come back about some of the specific increases.
Next slide, please.
Hi, I'm Kelly Christensen. I'm the Director of Strategic Planning at the Board of Water and Light. This first slide here, I'm going to talk a little about the state legislation and what's considered renewable versus clean. On the left, the items of solar, wind, hydropower, biomass, landfill gas, and geothermal are in the bill as those things are renewable. When you go to the clean energy side, they add on storage, nuclear, and natural gas capture with carbon capture. Each one of these groups has a specific requirement, so they're separate. So we have two different requirements in the bill, and so we've been working very hard to understand those calculations and project where we're going to be.
I'm sorry, what bill?
The Michigan legislative bill,
Which
the
is
energy bills.
Which is now law?
Yes.
Okay. thank
It became law in the winter, so yes. So we've been looking at that to make sure that we can comply with that. Next slide, please. This slide depicts the fact that we have actually, as of March of this year, been able to reduce our overall carbon intensity by 59% since 2005. And that gets coincident with us rolling off coal plants and doing other things. With our success in reducing carbon intensity, we expect to conform with the state clean energy targets, in addition to the targets announced by the federal government recently. Next slide. Regarding the current set of projects that we're working on, you can see there's a table for renewable and a table for our new energy projects. We did secure a $12 million grant from the MPSC for part of these projects. We also, again, as Scott indicated, we are working very hard to maximize our tax credits, both in how we do these projects and with our funding. On the left, we have 5 local solar projects that we're working on in various states of contract. Some of them have just been signed, some are getting signed. We also have a number of purchase power agreements, what Scott spoke to, for a good portion of some larger wind and solar. On the new energy projects, we obviously have the rice plant, what's been spoken here to tonight, and DE batteries and some future battery storage. It is important to know that we do plan to put over 650 megawatts of clean energy, renewable energy on our system. This is the first phase of another phase. This is a 10-year plan. So these projects in front of you and are basically the first part. We're already looking for additional projects out once these all start becoming operable.
On this slide, you can see our recent rate history. So you can see we do strive to keep rates levelized as possible and to avoid large fluctuations. We know it's easier for the customers to plan, and also it facilitates our financial planning. Recently, you can see that we had 3% increases, again indicating we like to have levelized increases at or below inflation where possible. We had 3 years of 3%. And then when we did rate increases, again, 2%, you could see that trend. It is important to note that for a 31-month period, we did hold rates steady during COVID. We knew that our customers were struggling. That's one of the reasons that we maintain financial strength, so in those times we can do things like that. However, we did come back then and we had the 2% rate increases. Now, the important part to note here is those 2% rate increases we had. There's some confusion, I think, when we say that our rate increases of the 6.95 and the 6% are attributable to inflation, because a lot of people are forward looking at inflation, which is true. Projections are around 3%. But what's missing from that context is those two years where we had a 2% increase. When we set that rate strategy, inflation was forecast at under 3%. However, we now know that those 2 years are 2 of the highest inflation years we've experienced over the last 30 years. You'd have to go back 30 years to find 2 years back to back from 22 and 23 that had that level of inflation. So when we talk about inflation, that's a little bit what we're recovering from. Our prices, our cost of materials and other items, as we discussed earlier, went up significantly during that 2-year period. So now when you see these percentages and we say it's related to inflation and energy investment, that inflation impact is what we've experienced recently, and most of our customers have experienced similar in their materials and other costs as well. Next slide, please. This one gives an example of the customer impacts. So we show examples from our residential class, which we have an average usage of around 500 kilowatt hours in our residential class. And then because our small, mid-size, and large commercial customers can range so much, We display a couple different levels so that customers can get an idea of their impact. East Lansing residential usage is actually very close to our average. It's a little under, it's about 477. So East Lansing residential users should expect to see a slightly less dollar increase than you would see up there because they have slightly less usage. Small commercial customers in East Lansing are slightly larger than our average customer base. It could just be the way that the business profile is in the area. And then mid-size commercial is a slightly larger in East Lansing, but the large commercial customers tend to be a little bit smaller. So within these ranges, it gives a good representation of the dollar impact to the customers within each class. Next slide, please. We do have dedicated renewable energy rate options to encourage investment in renewable energy. The distributed generation rate specifically is targeted to support customer investment in renewable energy by providing compensation for renewable energy that customers provide to our system. And then the GreenWise rate's targeted to support those who want to increase the amount of their usage that is attributable to renewable energy sources. And they can take that up to 100% renewable. Next slide, please. And of course, although increases are needed for the reasons that we've been discussing, we also understand that these increases can be difficult for customers. So as a result, there are some additional specific actions that we've taken to help with this. One is we have helped coordinate community resource fairs. We started that effort in 2021. Since then, we've been able to bring in over $3 million towards customer utility payments. Public Act 95 is an act we elected into. We opted into that to provide to make available additional funding to our customers. Since entering that program, the amount of funding available to our customers has increased by over $1 million. Our rate designs themselves are intended to give customers some degree of control. Time of use rates specifically, we have an off-peak savers rate for customers that can and are willing to shift their usage, can have more control and get some of our lowest rates. And then on the water side, we have the lowest rate for the first 2 CCS of usage for those that want to conserve. It encourages conservation, but also for those that can reduce their usage, it keeps their bill as low as possible. And then, of course, flexible payment options. We offer levelized payment plans, which sometimes are referred as budget payment plans, so that they're level for folks from month to month. And then we make as many payment options available as possible: kiosks, auto pay, over the phone, online, etc. Next slide, please. That's sort of our prepared materials that we had previously shared, but
I will wrap it up before we do take your questions. I think it's important to understand that our rates are still considerably under our nearest competitor, and our reliability is not even in the same court. And they have a 10% rate hike pending right now. I'm not sure what they'll get, but that will further open the gap between us and competitors that surround our service territory. And second, we do understand when our customers look at our renewable percentage right now, it gives them some pause because the numbers look low. But I assure you, we have thousands and thousands of panels that are in stock. They were delivered within the last 6 months, or in a building we rented. And as recent today, I signed another land agreement. We have 7 large solar projects that we're ready to start installing. So I think that I want to welcome us back next year to show you where the numbers are going. We're working on a big wind deal too. So we are posed to get to where we need to be. I don't see any issues with us getting to the 50% clean energy by 2030 with the amount of renewables we have coming on. It has gotten a little more taxing because we recently, working with the state of Michigan, secured a large industrial customer for economic growth in the area, which is double the size of any customer in our service territory. So that does tax, as you know, to supply them with the energy that they need. But right now, staff has assured me, Kelly's here, that we are on track, and once the customers start seeing the amount of solar, which a lot of it's going to be built in our service territory to keep the costs down. That way we don't have to pay for transmission. And then we're also in a couple major agreements that are outside our service territory. So we are in compliance now, of course, but we just don't have a concern with getting there. It just looks like we're off to a slow start. We're not, because we have the agreements, we had to get the money, and we're ready to start construction. Is early within. When's our first construction, Kelly, do you think?
We have one that's getting ready to go into construction right now.
Right now.
Yeah.
So
Most of the solar will be operable in 26 and 27.
Yeah. So with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions on any topics from the board.
Questions from council or city manager? Yes, ma'am.
It wasn't clear to me, your current generation portfolio, what's the mix, percentage-wise? You brought up the new projects that you have coming online, your current generation.
So like what percent renewable are we right now?
Yeah.
We're 21% renewable as of the new way we're required to calculate it by the state law.
And that includes, that's renewable and not clean?
It's renewable, yeah.
Okay.
It's renewable and clean, because we have a lot of, small projects in and outside of our service territory. And it also includes energy waste reduction programs too.
Got it. And on the time of use, are smart meters required for that program?
Yes. In fact, we really only have about 100 people who don't have a smart meter. There's a few small people who didn't want smart meters that, they have a smart meter, it just doesn't communicate. But we have both a time of use rate that's our regular customers, residential, are on a time of use rate with a smaller on-peak, off-peak gap. And then I'm actually on the peak saver one, which I've been working with for the last year to teach my family that the delay button on the dishwasher is there for a reason. And so I'm on that, and it's been beneficial for me, and it has changed our habits. We also have, since early 2010, when we started doing electric vehicles, we built an electric vehicle rate that is off-peak. It's, you pay a lot more if you charge that vehicle before, the evening. And so we have that rate too. And we also give rebates to put EV charging on your house. You can either get the separate meter, or we will give you a rebate if you go to that peak saver rate. So we're doing a lot of education on that right now.
And you said only 100 people without smart meters in your service area?
On the electric service territory.
Out of 100,000 customers, yes.
Okay.
And they opted out. Yeah. They pay an additional fee because we have to send a meter reader to read their meters.
Yeah. Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions?
I have questions.
I'm sorry?
I have questions.
Go ahead.
Do you guys get bonuses?
No, we do not.
And then do you get stocks or is this a corporation or?
No, the Lansing Board of Water and Light is owned by the City of Lansing. It operates on an independent charter, but we have 8 commissioners that represent different areas of the city by wards and at large. They're appointed by the mayor, and they have to be approved by council. And then we have 3 non-voting commissioners that represent, right now there's East Lansing is on Delta Township, and there's a rotating seat that goes between Delhi, DeWitt, and Meridian on a 1-year basis. So those commissioners are not compensated. They have 4-year terms, which are renewable, and they are a governance board. They set the policy, and then I'm responsible for the procedures.
When the public was given pushback on transparency and the pace that you all were moving for the increase, how come you couldn't pause for everyone to take a breath and everyone to get on the same page with you all?
Well, we think, it took us about 6 months. We had meetings, it was in our budget, so that's a pretty lengthy time. We had bond commitments that we told the commission that here's what we were looking at, and it did resonate with us. Initial rate strategies, we needed to be up where the other utilities are because we didn't recoup during COVID, and we pushed that, and the commission asked what we could do to stay single digits or lower, and so those speakers, those letters, the commission, the city council, when they weighed in, it had an effect on lowering, keeping our rate strategy down.
And is it possible for us to have a voting seat?
That would be a city charter change that would have to do that.
Lansing City.
Lansing City Charter, I'm sorry, thank you.
Okay, my last question is, you're familiar with utility burdens?
Can you give me an example, please?
Like when someone pays over a certain percent, like we've got housing burdens when someone pays over 30% to afford their rent or their mortgage, and then for utility burdens, it's over, I can't remember what the percentage is. So some of the acts and bills and things that you all are doing that you talked about, does that include people who rent?
Yes. In fact, it's a big part of our energy waste reduction proposals right now. We're working with the state and the MPSC to make sure that when they tell us how we're supposed to spend our energy waste reduction, we can make it effective for those renters who don't own the appliances for rebates and things. It's a challenge, but we are working through it. We have a swath of programs for low income in our energy waste reduction programs. We spend a lot of time and effort making sure that we can address that. And we are really tuned in to the governor's, trying not to have more than 6% of utilities be there. Some of the grants and things that we're going after, or the way we're doing them, are based on the EJ 40 plan, and Lansing specifically, and a little bit of East Lansing, has quite a bit of that area, and you do get more consideration for grants if you're focusing your programs on that. So,
I just want to clarify, you're talking about people who rent in apartment buildings?
yes.
Okay.
Or single family houses or duplexes.
All right.
Also, I think it's important that the board had previously not opted into the PA 95, and working with local legislators, we wanted to opt in to see how that worked for our residents, and it was very successful in the past. We had about $400,000 in our general fund to help our customers who can't pay. PA 95 opened that up to where last year we got $1.5 million from different agencies that we were not eligible, our customers weren't eligible to get funding from because we hadn't opted in. It did put an 88-cent charge on every meter, and that money was also recouped back from the state of Michigan, and worked out very good for the customers. So we think that we were able to triple the funding that we had in the past, and I don't know if that program gets pushed out enough towards East Lansing. I hear more of that in the Lansing area, so I thought I would put it on the record for tonight that if you call our call center, they can put you in touch with people who will help from getting your power turned off.
Thanks.
Yes, I have some questions. Thank you all for being here tonight. I really appreciate the opportunity to ask a number of questions that have sort of piled up a little bit over the past 2 years. So I hope you'll bear with me. So Board of Water and Light is subject to the new state requirement to be carbon-free by 2040, right?
Yes.
Okay. So on one of your slides, there is the energy intensive, the BW carbon intensity reduction graph, the blue line and the green line. Why doesn't that green line go to minus 100% at 2040?
Well, I think it's because right now we're, like you said, with the technology, this is where we show with what we've got in the hopper. We're looking for new technology to get us to the zero. We think we will make it, but we have, basically we have 15 years to figure it out. We keep doing research. We have enough in here to get us close, but we're going to have to do some more things, either more energy waste reduction or a new technology. I've heard, carbon capture. We're watching that. We're watching other technologies that we can use to get us totally to zero. But right now, that is our projection. We're going to meet them. We're confident with the targets for 2030, 2035. But when you get out there, I think all utilities are struggling. My expert is actually at a conference right now with a bunch of other professionals who are dealing with this, and they're all talking about how do we get there. So.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. So you've got a plan which has a lot of variables in it, it sounds like.
Yes.
Is this plan publicly available?
Well, this is the plan. I mean, the other part of these things is a lot of modeling numbers and things like that that we do behind the scenes, which we do all the time. But the plan here, the projects you see, are the ones to get us there. Now, on the energy waste reduction side, we're still working with the Michigan Public Service Commission to ferret out what our plan's gonna look like, because it's changing. So that'll be next year, and we'll get clearer and clearer, and I'm sure Dick would commit to coming back and talking through those plans, and as these things get in commercial production, showing where we're at and anything new that we've come up with, or if our goals have moved at all.
The modeling that you do, is that publicly available?
I mean, it could be, but it's pretty hard to make it. We do it with a consultant, and it's lots of spreadsheets, but we can talk about the factors and things. I'd have to bring experts in for that, though, because there's a lot of moving levers on how we model what we're going to need.
If somebody FOIA'd the modeling, they would get it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me jump to a question about the FOIA, because I'm in receipt of a document that is a response from BWL to a FOIA request from January from a local citizen group. And they asked for a lot of information, I guess, but the estimate was that it was going to take 85 hours of your time to fill the FOIA request, and the bill was going to be $5,500. I looked at the response, which enumerates all the information that the local group requested. And it looks like some of that stuff should probably be on the website anyway, like electricity loads, annual electricity loads, and the cost of gas. I mean, when I think about what we have to do in terms of our budget is public. All that stuff is public, and nobody has to FOIA to get our budget. And there may be other stuff on that list that needs to be protected. I don't know, but it sure seemed like $5,500 for a FOIA request is prohibitive for a small group who's just trying to find out what the modeling numbers are.
Sure, had they just asked for modeling numbers, it would have been a fraction of the cost, and I was brought into the loop on that FOIA request, and we did respond showing if you narrowed it to this, you could get down to a very reasonable number. But the sheer magnitude of information on the FOIA is just based on the hourly rate. And we also told them that if they thought it was reasonable, they could appeal it, and the board could say, we want to waive some of this. We were just following our procedures, and they didn't take that avenue. And they also did not ask us to narrow the request.
So, and I don't want to insert myself into that whole interaction. I really don't, but I do have a suggestion, which is that if there's an opportunity to put information out into the public to address concerns about transparency, it seems like that would be a low price to pay for improved public perception.
No argument here.
Okay, thank you.
No argument here.
Most of the stuff's in the meeting packet that goes out with the board, too.
Kelly said most of the stuff that you spoke, most of the stuff is in a meeting packet, but we could share that and see which is on the website.
Yeah. Anything that goes to our board is on when we do the agenda, and it's posted on our website under our governance, has the meeting packet in there for review. That's what our board commissioners see, and that's what they work from during our working meetings and our board meetings.
So it sounds like some of that information may already be out there.
It could be, but I don't want to make any kind of leap that that entire FOIA request, which I didn't see, would be in meeting packets, or most likely the individuals would have got it from the meeting packets.
What size rate increase would you need to avoid building a gas-fired plant?
Let me think about 170. Well, so $170 million for the RICE engines on a $450 million budget. So we could back calculate it. It would obviously anything you shave would lower the cost of the magnitude of the rate hike.
Well, what I was driving at is your argument for the RICE engines is, well, I'm actually a little unsure what the argument is. It's partly for reliability, right? But it's also partly for capacity, because you've got a new electric car battery plant coming on.
Yes, those are both correct. Yeah.
Which is a little ironic that you're building a gas-fired plant to support the building of electric cars.
Yeah.
But so So my question really is, if you were to substitute other technologies for the RICE engines, right, like storage, for example, how much would you have to spend to get equivalent reliability to what you, and capacity that you would get with the RICE plant? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely does. Yes, sir. It does. And right now, we could do it with nuclear modules, which I am actually a fan of, or we could do it by purchasing power. There's no technology that you could even begin to afford to offset the intermittence of the renewables we're building. Believe me, I'm a big fan of solar, and wind's okay, but I do like solar. But in January last year, we have a 500 megawatt load. In January, we had 2 days of solar production out of all of our fields. So it doesn't matter if you cover the entire state with it, you had those 2 days. Now, you can buy power and get it that way, and then you're at the mercy of the market. So, you know, those are the 2 ways to do it. The RICE engines are there to support the intermittence of your renewables. Our battery storage that we're building, which is huge, has a 4-hour rundown time. Now, you could, you know, that's if the load matches the batteries. If the load is half, then you could go to 8 hours. But there's no scenario on our system. 160 or 120 megawatts of batteries is just huge. That's our build out, but we have a 500 megawatt load. And so, you know, chances are if the solar's not there, there could be wind. Wind's a good profile for us. But the MISO market that we rely on has, you know, gives you credit for like 1% solar in January. So, you know, even the government recognizes that, and that's why the government recognizes the unfortunate need right now for the RICE engines. Do we want to run the RICE engines? Absolutely not. They're there to when the solar isn't there or the wind isn't there, they're made to peak and take and absorb that load because, you know, simply put, we're probably the only industry in the world that has to make the product and it's delivered and consumed instantaneous. Any drop in that is a brownout. And the RICE engines right now, the more companies move towards solar and wind, the more they'll be buying those engines until something can replace them. Until the battery storage technology gets better, or fusion, or hydrogen, or people become more acceptable to the small nuclear modules, which, you know, I think is, you know, I'm a fan of those. And I mean, it's probably not what you're on here, but there's a 3-year wait to get RICE engines right now because every big utility is using them to peak so that they don't have the brownouts. Are they efficient to run 24/7? Absolutely not. That's not what they're designed for. They're kind of like the home generator in your garage when the power goes off on somebody else's utility. And they peak, they come on, as soon as the power comes back, you're there. That's what they're there for. And even the state recognizes that. That's why they don't have to be shut down in 2040. They know until something changes. The state's goals are great. We're on board with them, but they know you can't get there. I just came from a seminar last week with 40 public utilities, and nobody's as close in the public realm as we are to getting there. You know, you're not quite to zero yet, but it's a goal, and you know that's a long way out. And I'm very confident there'll be technology that comes on sooner than later that you can, you know, move more towards more efficient. So solar panels are getting more efficient every year. They're getting cheaper. It's not the cost. It's the availability. It's 50% of the solar is rated on an annual basis. 50% of our solar energy comes in June, July, and August. 1% comes in January. But we have to provide that energy 24/7. And it's especially hard on a utility that has a heavy industrial load. It's a lot easier in an area that doesn't have the industrial load because you don't see the peaks and the valleys. And we're also having to prepare for electric cars. And we're ready for that as your folks start getting electric vehicles. As Kelly said, the average load in East Lansing's in the 550 kilowatt hour range. One electric vehicle is 250 kilowatts a month to charge. So if the average homeowner gets 2 electric cars, they just doubled their residential usage, and we have to supply that energy. We have the energy, and in the suburbs and East Lansing, we have the technology in place and the wiring. Some of the older areas we have to work on, but I'm kind of letting you know that energy growth is growing, and trying to get to this, we're going to get there, but it's not cheap either. But the RICE engines are probably the biggest heartburn out of anything that we've done and heard from our customers, and we understand it. But I don't know if you'll find a utility that isn't permitting them right now either. And if there was another way, if we didn't have to burn gas, I wouldn't burn gas. When you have a free energy source of wind and sun, we want to capture that. But it just has limitations, and that's what we explain to our customers, and it's probably a long answer to your question.
No, I appreciate that. So we're all trying to learn about this stuff. So I appreciate whatever details you can throw our way, and I'm just trying to clarify everybody's understanding of these issues. So I hope that's clear. So another way to ask the question is, what would happen if you spent $170 million on pump storage to handle the intermittence issue? Is it just that's completely...
I do like pump storage. Kelly's group, when we did the all-source RFP, which is something PSC, the state, they applauded that fact. We went to anybody in the world that wanted to submit, how do we get to this goal? What does it take to get here? And we thought we'd get 20 or 30 proposals. How many did you get?
110.
110 proposals, and we looked at every one and selected the one that was best for our area, our customers, and what we can, when I say our area, geographically, what we can do here, and that's how we implemented. And pump storage, we'd have to...
I don't remember if we got one. But
I don't think that we had an option submitted to us for pump storage.
And does that mean that they were impractical, and so nobody bothered to develop a proposal?
That would be my guess, sir.
Okay.
But we had nuclear options. We had coal options. Yeah, I mean, obviously we didn't consider those, but because that doesn't fit where we're going. But and I expect enhancements. I agree with the speaker. The carbon capture, it's in its infancy. It's very expensive. We follow it, and every utility is, because the border, we have off ramps, to protect the border water and light if we can't get there. But some utilities don't have those off ramps.
A question about the distributed generation rate that you're offering for homeowners. So the new rate, well, a bit of context here. So we installed solar on our house in April, and we're very surprised to learn that the credits we were receiving were way below what we thought they were going to be. And so I talked to Braden Halley, who stepped me through what BW&amp was doing on this front. And the new rate is going to be 7.5 cents per kilowatt hour, right? Which is higher than it's been, so that's great. But it's just over 50 cents on the dollar when you compare to what you pay for energy from the grid. So that's a big change from net metering. And you mentioned that you wanted to, incentivize residential solar installations. The incentives just don't, we didn't do it for the money, right? We didn't put in solar because we thought we're not going to live to see the ROI on our solar, okay? We did it for other reasons. We did it because we thought it was the right thing to do. We did it because we want battery backup. But a lot of people are not going to be in that position, and they're going to want to know that the investment they make in solar is eventually going to pay off in their lifetimes. So are there plans to improve the outflow credit at some point?
We're looking at it. We've had a couple of comments, both from some of our other commercial customers who are looking at it, one school district. We moved to 7.5% this year. It's over a 3-year average of what we feel it is. We already have it on our books for our next rate analysis to look at that and look at the structure to make sure that we're being fair to those customers who are putting that back on our grid.
Because, the way I read it is I'm paying just under half of the charge for BWL to act as a battery for me. I'm happy to pay you guys to be a battery for me. That's fine, but that seems pretty steep.
Yes, we're looking at, right now, we look at cost of service because each group that we speak to has, their concerns. When we talked about P95, that's the 88 cents we put on the bill. You wouldn't believe the hate mail that came to my office because they're saying it's not your right to collect money and give it to another group. So we hear the same thing. Are we subsidizing people that put solar on their roofs? And the answer would have been, well, we're not recouping our costs, so it's a balancing act. The first few years, we just said, we are trying to incentivize this, and we were, net metering, and now we've backed off a little bit, just trying to balance it for people saying, well, I can't put this on my house. I live in an apartment. You don't have, but now I'm having to pay for it when I can't pay my bill. I mean, the worst part about the job is the 300 people a day we have to turn off. But you got to take a look and see, how do you balance that by, you try to get them all the money they can to pay that, but if you don't recoup or if you don't stay balanced, you push one here and then another group. So I'm just trying to, let you know what we're trying to do here, trying to keep things at cost of service.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that answer. That's helpful. So one last question, a little bit further afield. So 12 years ago, after the 2012 ice storm, on my block, we were out for 10 days. Isolated. We had an isolated block, and it's fine. Reliability's been good since then, but we don't have any trees in our backyard anymore.
Understand the trade-off.
And we need trees for lots of reasons. They sequester carbon, they're habitats, they're good for property values, they're beautiful, people like them, we need trees. So what's the plan for starting to bury utilities so we can improve reliability and also have trees in our backyards?
Obviously, new construction, we bury utilities, and we've told every entity that of our townships and cities that if you want your utilities buried, working around streetscapes and things like that, we're happy to do that. There's a cost with it like anything, but we also would bake in the savings of not having to trim trees in those areas anymore, the costs there and the reliability. But if an individual group came to us and said, we want it buried, we'd give a price to do that, and obviously that price is much more attractive if you're doing a road rebuild. But a lot of the areas you have to understand, that if you utilities a lot of them are in the back lots now. So if you want to go down the street, then you have to get the service from the street to the back of their house, and they may not want it in the front, and you have to get a space for pad mount transformers to sit underground. All solvable problem, not problems, but opportunities. So if East Lansing says, hey, we're going to go down this street, will you give us a price, to bury that, put the utilities underground? Absolutely.
So I think that's a discussion that I would like us to have as we move forward. I mean, we have a lot of older neighborhoods, with treescapes that people find very valuable, and I would certainly be happy to have you guys come back and bury the poles and get the junk out of the sky in my backyard.
It cleans the area up. It reduces outages. And now, when you have a dig-in, the outages are a little longer. But that's not any reason not to consider it. Of course.
I mean, it seems to me that one of the big issues here is coordination between two authorities that neither of which has power over the other to make sure that something happens, and it's all about sort of being willing to coordinate and make it happen.
We're welcome. We welcome our engineering department to talk to you folks, because a lot of it is, the coordination piece is. Some of it could be as simple as just getting the conduit into the ground while you're doing the work, and you could come back and do the electric installation later and work it out with the homeowners. Or if it's a backlot line, then you can just trench it in. You can trench it in. But I talked to an engineer not too long ago. That can be really hard on the trees too, because you're going right through the root structure. So we just want to lay out all the facts, because this is customer driven. If the customer, we buried one not too long ago down a street in the west side of Lansing. They want the trees trimmed, and they says, give us a price to bury it on the street, and they wrote a check, and we buried it, and everybody was happy. But not everybody has that the means to do that, and so you have to find how it's funded to do that. But no, there's no issues sitting down with the subject matter experts to talk about what it would take to do that in an area that you're looking to work in.
Thanks very much for your patience.
No, it's no problem. We're happy to come explain what's going on, and as other questions crop up, let us know. Your representative, I can see, is here. He can bring them to the board meeting. Just because the GR doesn't have a vote, rest assured, his voice carries the same clout as any other commissioner that I work for.
Chair, why don't you stand up so everybody knows who you are? Thanks for coming tonight.
Yeah.
The last name is bow, like in bow tie, buff in your shoes.
Yep.
For those of you who speak French, it means beautiful bee.
I hesitate to ask this question, but
Please.
so the reason your power lines go along streets or backyards is because you have easements, correct?
Correct. Yes, sir.
And so in an older neighborhood, in order to bury your lines, you would have to get to the backyards through people's yards, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you don't have easements through those yards to get from your lines in the front on the street to get to the lines in the back, is that correct?
Nope. Currently, we have overhead easements.
Okay. So in other words, if we just took, for instance, my block in South Lawn right back here, which has lines along the middle of the block and lines in the front, the reality is to bury lines, you'd effectively have to get easements from all of those homeowners who have control of their property, who would allow you to come in and do, I think the word you used was trenching, to get to the back lines, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I don't have any further questions. Anything else from the council? Thanks a lot for coming, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, referring to the agenda here, the next item on the agenda is item 6.2, Police Oversight Commission presentation of 2023 annual report. Thanks for coming, folks.
All righty. Well, good evening to you, Mr. Mayor and fellow council members. We are here, me, the chair, along with the chair of the Complaints Committee and the chair of the Use of Force Committee, as well as Cap Eswitz, the vice chair of the whole commission, to present the bulk of the work that we did in 2023 and to give a summation and some recommendations of where we think ELIPOC and the police department and the commission should go going forward. So I will turn it over to CAF, who will present the work of our complaints committee.
Good evening, everyone. Prior to 2021, complaints were summarized and reported annually to the Human Rights Commission. The chief attended this meeting and listened to the concerns or suggestions of the HRC members, but follow-up was minimal. With the formation of the Oversight Commission, the complaint process now included review by ELIPOC after the ELPD completed their investigation. In 2023, ELIPOC reviewed 11 complaint investigations, including 2 administrative complaints initiated by ELPD after incidences. The first slide is just the breakdown of race and gender of the complainants and outcomes from that as well. ELIPOC's review usually consists of reviewing the documents received from ELPD, asking questions, watching video when it feels appropriate, and then making recommendations to ELPD in the form of motions from the commission table. The second slide, if you don't mind, shows the complaints broken down into type of the policy violation, the complaint or violation or complaint based on who made the policy violation request. The third column is primarily from the internal investigation of the police shooting at Meyer, and those were ELPD's findings when they completed the review of their incident. In 5 of the 11 complaints ELIPOC reviewed in 2023, we were satisfied with the outcome of the ELPD investigation. In the other 6, motions were passed requesting ELPD to come to a different conclusion or implement changes to policy or training. Through 2023, ELPD committed only to further training on body-worn camera policies and use, and agreed to insert a sentence into the policy prohibiting retaliation. I meant to actually check to see if that sentence was removed when the other policy changes were made in May, but I didn't get a chance to. All of our other recommendations were denied. Chris will discuss the use of force policy and training suggestions that were made following one investigation shortly. I will just mention the recommendations ELIPOC made following the officer shooting of Mr. Van Atten at Meyer in April of '22, which ELIPOC has never received a reply for, nor have we been given notice that any of these have been implemented. These are all listed on page 34 of the annual report, and I'll go through them quickly. So this was a motion passed by the commission, a recommendation to utilize in future similar situations to utilize a critical decision-making model, hire an individual trained in determining bias in policing to review complaints, dispatch calls, etc. Implement policy that would review each dispatch call prior to sending officers. This must include a review for racial bias and a threat assessment. Implement policy specific to large commercial establishments. Establish a relationship with the general manager and the asset protection managers. Call the managers prior to sending in officers. Review the information provided for racial bias and do a threat assessment. Set up a command post. No action is taken until they are directed by the on-site supervisor. Do not enter the building unless all of the above are completed and require response. Response must outweigh risk of harm to others in the building. Pursue a fleeing individual only if apprehension does not put others, including officers, in harm's way, and never if the subject can be apprehended at another time in a safer manner. Do not shoot a fleeing subject. Policy 1220C1 is too broad and gives cover to every incidence of deadly force. And the second recommendation regarding hiring a bias investigator was suggested multiple times. We have questioned the treatment of BIPOC individuals frequently. However, the investigator has found no bias, stating no racial slurs were used during the encounter. The third slide is for informational purposes only. However, it is noteworthy that 2 officers against whom complaints were sustained were a black male officer and a white female officer. Just a reminder that bias can come into play within a department and who receives discipline and who does not. And this trend is worth keeping an eye on. Complaints in 2024, I know we're talking about 2023, but just to give you a little summary of what's been going on since we're almost at the end of the year. Continue to overrepresent demeanor as a basis for the complaint. ELIPOC has recommended findings around this in several complaints, but they've been denied. We have also recommended greater attention to mental health and developmental disabilities. You will hear similar messaging around use of force and individuals in crisis. So that'll get covered here shortly. And I just wanted to thank the council for their support of our work around pretextual stops, as well as the support of our training for the commission itself. I attended the NACOLS conference in 2023, and we'll be there again next week to learn more about police oversight. Thank you.
Okay. You go to the next slide. I'm Chris Root, and I'm going to discuss findings in the report about use of force. The Commission receives from the Police Department monthly narrative reports about use of force, which the department calls response to resistance reports. We also receive a spreadsheet with data about use of force incidents for the year. I'll say more about the spreadsheet in a few minutes. Almost all the data in our annual report are based on the narrative reports. This first slide shows that there were more incidents involving use of force in 2023 than there were in 2022. There were 160 incidents in 2023 compared to 144 the previous year. The number of individuals against whom force was used was also higher. That's the people column there. 217 in 2023 compared to 167 in 2022, an increase of 30%. The second table on the slide shows that 51 of the incidents in 2023 occurred during the months of September and October. This probably doesn't surprise many of you. This is almost 2/3 of the total for the whole year. Among these incidents were 13 fights in the downtown involving 29 people subjected to force. So that was an unusual category also during that time period that explains some of the large numbers. I should point out that the police department reports do not identify people who had more than one encounter with police officers involving use of force. So we cannot count unique individuals involved in use of force incidents concerning any topic. Next slide. This slide shows where use of force incidents took place. The first table shows location by the sectors defined by the police department. which are shown on page 45 of the report. Sector 2 is the main downtown, extending north to Bircham Drive. 46% of all the incidents in 2023 occurred in Sector 2. The second table shows the types of locations where incidents occurred. In order of frequency, incidents happened on the street, at residences, and at businesses, followed by incidents that began with a traffic stop. Next slide. This slide shows the race of people against whom force was used. Good. In 2023, ELPD officers used force against Black people many more times than against white people, continuing the pattern in 2022. In 2023, force was used against Black people 125 times and against white people 72 times. In other words, 58% of all uses of force were against Black people, 33% of all uses of force were against white people. There is no accurate count of all the people present in East Lansing who might come in contact with police officers by race. So we can't say exactly how much more likely it is for a Black person to have an encounter with police officers that involve force compared to white people. But the large numbers of incidents involving Black people that we have seen in the past 2 years are a cause for concern. Last June, when we presented the 2022 annual report to Council, we talked a lot about problems with the police department's use of force database, which the CNA report also identified. Regarding the many incidents where there is more than one person involved, the database does not accurately report types of force used by individual officers or against specific individuals. Our 2023 annual report, completed in April of 2024, says this problem has yet to be fixed. There is good news, however. The police department and the commission have been working together since May to solve these problems, and we have made considerable progress. This effort is a response to a recommendation in our 2022 annual report. The Commission's Use of Force Committee and ELPD administrators have met 4 times. We have identified how to redesign the database, improve the data fields, and clean the data. ELPD staff has done a lot of work. They are switching to a new database application recommended by the city's IT staff, which is what allows for the redesign of the database. We are optimistic that the improved database will make it possible for the first time to do statistical analysis of ELPD use of force data about 2025. We do still need to address the resources needed to actually do this statistical work each year once the database, allows for it to be done. This project will benefit the police department, the commission, and the community. And I hope this experience of cooperation between the department and the commission will have a positive impact also. Over to you.
Okay, I'm going to present to you the bulk, one of the bigger pieces of ELIPOC's works, which is the encounters with individuals in crisis. So the ordinance requires us to receive these reports every 6 months from the East Lansing Police Department about their interactions with our vulnerable population. So the first slide gives you an overview of that requirement, and it talks about the population, including people experiencing mental health crisis, homelessness, and juveniles. As I said, we are mandated to submit these, the police department is mandated to submit these reports to the Oversight Commission every 6 months, and the reports not only provide data about the demographics of both the officers and the individuals involved, but also enables the commission to investigate and take actions if necessary when it comes to recommended training or policy suggestions. This helps increase a level of transparency, and it's also crucial to maintaining the public's trust and accountability in our department. Next slide. This next slide gives you data or data comparisons between 2022, the 2022 annual report and this annual report of 2023, where we saw some significant changes. For example, in 2022, there were 411 encounters involving individuals in crisis compared to the 156 in 2023. It is believed that this reduction is mainly due to the narrowing of categories that we asked the police department to report on and criteria. However, we did see an increase in encounters with individuals experiencing homelessness or being unhoused from 38 in 2022 to 55 in 2023. The juvenile encounters also saw a slight increase from 37 in 2022 to 43 in 2023. These changes and these numbers are noteworthy and highlight the evolving nature of our interactions with the vulnerable population in the area. Next slide. We tracked 11 types of incidents, including assaults, child abuse, domestic assaults, homelessness, and welfare checks, among others. The data comes from 3 primary resources: the State Records Management System, the ELPD Daily Officers Report, and information from Ingham County 911 Dispatch. These categories are defined by specific criteria such as mental health, juvenile homelessness, to ensure clarity in the reporting that we're doing. All right, the next slide, please. The next slide looks at social work and involvement in use of force. In 2023, there were 60 mental health investigations reported. However, we only were able to identify 20 incidents from the use of force report we were able to identify 20 incidents that were missing from the use of force report, indicating that there is gaps, or still gaps, in the data collection by the police department. The social worker was only present on 22 of those incidents, despite being reported as available for all of them. Additionally, 58 referrals were made to further support. However, we saw a decrease in the overall use of force from 33 incidents in 22 to 19 in 2023. Types of force used could be included as handcuffing, taser displays, physical controls, and gun and rifle displays. The decrease in overall encounters, particularly in crisis situations, point to a redefined or effort by the Commission to streamline the reporting criteria, but it also raises concerns about potentially underreporting by the department. The data gaps are still particularly a concern particularly with the missing incidents in mental health investigations and in juvenile encounters. But however, we have seen great work and improvement in the data process going forward, but these missteps highlight the inconsistencies we still face in the reporting process. We need to further improve the accuracy of our data, which the Use of Force Committee is working on. So we've seen a lot of improvement. And so to conclude these encounter reports, we want to state that the encounter reports are vital for the transparency of the work that we do as ELIPOC Commission, as well as the police department's encounter with people in vulnerable states. It helps us as a community to recognize what work still needs to be done and understand the situations that people can find themselves in that often lead to crimes of passion and often lead to interactions with the police. Next slide, please. So in closing, I want to reiterate that our approach to the use of force and the community interactions needs to continue to evolve. We are committed as a commission to making this happen, working closely with the council and the ELPD, using the guiding principles of the American Law Institute to rethink and hopefully reform a lot of our policies and procedures with the department. Moving forward, specifically, our training, the department's training needs to emphasize a de-escalation, careful assessments of situations, and a use of force only as a last resort. We will continue to improve our ability to recognize and respond to individuals with mental health conditions and developmental disability, ensuring our communication is respectful and clear. In other words, the department itself needs to recognize that more people are or more people have mental health conditions that are not readily visible to the blind eye, and thus need to work on improving their interactions with them. Our focus will be on their focus should be on treating everyone they encounter with dignity and eliminating any bias from those interactions. That being said, we are seeking or asking that they reconsider the ELIPOC's recommendations about the use of force policies and procedures that were rooted and based in the American law principles, which we met and discussed, the commissioners as a whole. We are also asking for improved departmental training. We have a lot of discussions about that, but we also need the police department to recognize the cruciality of training, particularly in learning techniques to assess situations and avoid the use of force, as I stated, recognizing people with mental health, as well as just going back to what Cal says, a lot of the complaints we've received is about the attitude and the demeanor of the police officers. And even in the videos for which we watch when we're doing the complaints that people speak, it's about the attitude and the demeanor. And so our recommendation is that the police start doing training on that. What does that look like? And I think leading into what we have been doing for the 2024 year is sort of working on that. What does it like, pointing that out to the police department, but also asking them to investigate their own officers based on the attitudes and the demeanors of their officers. And not oftentimes they don't accept those asks of them, and oftentimes reject them. And I think that is which has led to the increase, I think, in the type of complaints we're getting, where people are just really disheartened about the way the police officers treat them. And this is not particularly a color thing. This is many people who interact with the police officers, and just a high level of comments that we often hear in our body-worn cameras that we watch, just a high level of just irresponsible comments that they make while representing the city of East Lansing is a problem. I think that is a charge that we need to take up as a city, and then the commission will take up. I think the commission is also looking at mental health and planning to host something in the coming year about mental health, as we have seen a lot of complaints dealing with how the police treats people who they encounter. One other thing, I don't know if Chris mentioned it, but something else we worked on was the body-worn camera procedures and policies. Chris and her committee did a lot of work around that. And so, yeah, that is the highlights of what we've been doing this year, but also the work that we did in 2023. So thank you.
Anybody?
I have one.
Go ahead.
You have, for the unhomed data and mental health issues, you have age information to identify juveniles.
Yes.
But you don't have age for the other use of force data of those individuals involved?
There is age for every
There
person
is.
involved in a use of force incident. We
Okay.
haven't done any analysis of that,
Okay.
but we do have, it's in the narrative reports.
Okay, I was just curious what the percentage of the complaints and use of force with the age data too.
Yeah, the three of us are reporting things from three different data sources, and they're
Yeah.
not, it's not all about one set of interactions. I mean, none of us are talking about all the interactions police have with people in the community. We don't actually have that data. We have complaint data, use of force data, and relations with vulnerable populations. And they intersect, but they're all different groups of data, actually.
And on the use of force, the definition is?
Good question. There is a wide range, and one of the things we're actually talking about in this working group is some refinement of definitions of types of use of force. And there are going to be some changes. At Meyer, there were shots fired by police officers at a person fleeing. That's, obviously the strongest use of force. The lowest use of force, if you could say so, is handcuffing someone without an arrest. Some of those, in terms of people with presenting in mental health crisis, some of that is for people who are being put in a police car to be taken to a medical facility if the officers feel there's any resistance involved. In between that, there's a lot of display of guns and rifles by officers.
Tasers and pepper spray.
Right,
That's
there's
pulled
by
or-
number, lots and lots of guns being pulled. There are use of tasers and pepper spray. Pepper spray is almost always used in fights. It's not generally used for other situations. And yes, tasers are the next down from shooting with a gun. You're right about that. And then there is a category of physical force, which in the police have agreed to separate into two categories. One is what they call soft, empty hand techniques, which is what everything has been called in physical force so far. The other is PPCT, pressure point control tactics, which are intended to inflict pain so that you change your physical behavior or position. There are also a lot of takedowns, including one that the police chief started an administrative complaint about at the end of 2020. I guess it wasn't the end, it was during 2023, where one officer was holding a person's hands behind their back, another officer did a leg sweep, and there was only one thing that could happen, which was that the person landed in his face on the road. So we're trying to get more particular focus on takedowns, because that's very, very different from soft, empty hand control or PPCT.
Thank you.
Yeah, so there's a lot more about use of force than just a few numbers in tables. And that's one of the reasons why improving the database is so important to us, because you can learn more about patterns among the interactions than we're able to do now. It's incredibly important to have the narrative reports. And very few cities have this. I mean, partly it's because we're a small city. If it were 1,600 incidents, it would be more difficult to do narrative reports. It's 160. So you can read and see what happened. And the descriptions have improved over the years, over the 2 years. And you can see, what was happening in the incident and what type of force is used. And that's obviously something we care about a lot, and we just haven't been able to summarize that quantitatively because we're still working from hand counting from the narrative reports.
And the changes the IT department is working with the department on, is that a good remedy in your mind? Or?
We think it's going to work. We anticipate checking the October data in the new application to see if it will work. The department has been using an application called Guardian Tracking, which they subscribed to for a different purpose originally. It was for early intervention system, and then they decided to use it for use of force incidents as well. And it just does not allow for the complexities of reporting at the same time about incidents of use of force, officers involved in the incidents, and individuals involved in the incidents, being able to connect those things but also keep them separate. And so it was really providing inaccurate information. And Guardian Tracking said, actually, you can't use this system to do what you need to do. So that was one of the first things we had to figure out. And then it turns out that one or two other departments had already started using this different application. It was available to the police department, and it does look like it's going to work for us.
Oh,
That's great.
Yeah, it is.
Can I follow up with just one comment? This is much more detailed in the report itself, but I do think this is important. The commission did a lot of work around use of force by having a public hearing, by having experts in the field come in. We had a lot of materials. The American Law Institute is mentioned, but a couple of other institutions, and then a great deal of work, a lot of it done by Chris, on tying all of those recommendations into policy, which we turned over to the previous police chief, sat on his desk, and it came back without any of our recommendations implemented. And that's a huge concern to me because, just simply in the name response to resistance versus use of force is an escalating model. Response to resistance gives you an idea that if they do something, you can do something more. And the trend in police reform around the country is de-escalation. We need to go with a model that force is the very last thing used. We can't be pulling out guns every time we have concerns. I mean, we've had suicidal individuals have guns pulled on them. Yep. And so this is an important piece to the work of the commission and improving the police department here in the city.
Any other questions?
Okay.
Ms. Watson?
Sure. I was on the Human Rights Commission before I was appointed to City Council, and so I just remember the times of it was January that the chief would come in and he would show us information, and it was really hard to track or understand and see patterns. And so just appreciations for where we've been and where we've come, because sometimes there's still a disconnect with folks trying to understand that there is data out there that speaks to some of these inequities, and it's to the service of the community that we work together to address them. I know East Lansing Independent Police Oversight Commission meets for at least 3 hours every month. And your subcommittees, how long do you all meet with your subcommittees for?
Complaints Committee usually meets once a month for about 2 hours.
That's also true of the Use of Force Committee.
Yeah, and
There's a lot of work that goes on.
It's a lot of work, and I know that there's other things that we could be doing or that would make us happy. But again, I just appreciate you all's insight, and this is as ELIPOC as a whole as well, because the design of ELIPOC was also to appoint social worker or to appoint a therapist and different perspectives to see Black and brown faces, because that's the people that are coming in contact most often with the police. So just wanted to give that background and give my appreciations to you all. It's hard work, and I know it is very sensitive for us because, the police are maybe the only people that can carry out deadly force legally, and so it has to be taken very seriously. And obviously none of us want to lose a loved one, someone we care about, or really anyone in the community who comes through the community because something escalates as opposed to the de-escalation. So just again, thank you all for being here with us in the community.
Dr. Altmann?
Sort of a methods question. So you're interested in trends over time, right? But there are also other things changing over time. So I noted 3. You've got descriptions changing, the narrative reports. Your definitions are changing, and your database is changing. So you've got confounds there. How do you pick up trends over time when the various analytics you use are also changing over time?
The work we're doing now on changing the design of the database so that there can be analytics run is also the time that we are trying to to look again at the fields, look again at the choices within the fields. We're trying to do all of that at the same time.
Yep.
Now, that's, as you say, there are going to be some differences when that comes online, so to speak, compared to what we've been working with now. But what we've been working with now has all been hand counting from narrative reports. So it just makes sense to try to improve things so that we can do quantitative analysis as well. Some of the information we'll be able to, compare to 2022 and 3 and 4. But we'll be able to do a lot more analysis in 2025 than we were able to do by hand counting in any case. So it just seems to try to improve the data as well as the analytical ability all at once in 2025.
And then if you freeze it, then moving forward, you'll be able to pick up trends over time because everything will be stable.
Sure. Well, as I say, we can look at some trends earlier. Some things don't change. And we can, include the earlier years. Yeah, we think it's really quite important to expand the categories of use of force, for example, because calling everything, every kind of physical force soft, empty hand control just isn't descriptive. And the police have agreed with us that can be separated to better convey what's actually going on. So, good descriptions are more important than just, being able to say the same thing over more years.
Anything else from the council? Thanks for all your work, folks.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, we move on to item 6.3, discussion of planned Northern Tier Trail extension from Soccer Complex to Coolidge Road and associated grant timelines.
Good evening, Council. Kathy DeChambeau, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Arts for the City of East Lansing. Very excited this evening to reintroduce you to Justin Dranke, who's our new Assistant Director of Parks, Recreation, and Arts. We're here tonight to talk about the trail extension from the soccer complex to Coolidge Road. This is a project that started a number of years ago. As you probably read in the agenda item report, we can go back all the way to 1998 with this project. In some ways, what we want to do tonight is refresh where we are with this project, and we want to get your input because we've had some unexpected turns in this project, and we want to get some input from council as to next steps because we have some options available. So we're going to walk through a brief PowerPoint to kind of give you the lay of the extension again, and to talk about the funding for this project, and then kind of talk through some of the steps and answer all your questions.
Okay, so I'd like to start with just a concept plan. I have only 7 more slides on here, but there's a lot more context. If you need me to dig deeper into anything, I'm happy to. But I want to just cover the highlights and let you guide us where we need to go with further questions. But up here we do have a concept plan. This is not the final design, so where a line is on that trail is not necessarily where it would possibly end up. This is more to show kind of the boundary and the concept of where that would go. Ultimately, this would be a 3/4 mile addition to the Northern Tier Trail system. It would be a 10-foot wide trail that connects from the soccer complex over to Coolidge Road. And then if we can go to the next slide, we've got some highlights of the history. This project is unique in that it covers both public land as well as 3 conservation easements that would take place on private property. And so the site plan approvals for the villas actually date back to 2004, and that's when those conservation easements were established. As a condition of those site plan approvals for both the villas and the Beaumont, there is a condition requiring construction of a pedestrian trail in that conservation easement. We tried to move forward with this project in 2012 by applying for a Natural Resources Trust Fund grant. We were not able to secure all of the paperwork for some of the easements in order to meet that deadline, and so we had to withdraw that application. We were able to make some progress on those easements and get everything filed in between 2020 and 2022, which then allowed us to reapply for the Natural Resources Trust Fund grant in 2022, which we received, and then we applied for matching funds through the Ingham County Trails and Parks Millage in 2023. So the estimate of cost for this project is approximately $850,000, but this is May of 2023 numbers. When we bid this out, I would expect to see some increase in the cost, given that this number is from about 2 years old now. But this is a project where we would be braiding multiple funding sources, looking at the Natural Resources Trust Fund grant, looking at the County Trails and Parks Millage, as well as contributions from the developers. So the villas and the Beaumont are required to fund the portion of trail on their properties, and then making up any difference with income tax funds. And I just want to highlight on the next slide, for your benefit as well as for the benefit of the public, how the income tax funds do come into this project. For the revenues of the income tax get divided where 60% goes toward unfunded pension liabilities, 20% goes to public safety, and 20% goes to infrastructure. And then that infrastructure portion, 60% goes to streets and sidewalks, 40% then comes to parks and trails. So there's kind of a dedicated source of funds to work on improvement projects in our parks and trails. And we've been able to accomplish a lot with this funding source. Just on the slideshow up here, there's 6, 7, 8, 9 projects that we are finishing up, leveraging some income tax funds for each of these just in this fiscal year. So a lot of benefit is coming from this funding source, and we're able to really make some cool improvements in our public facilities, leveraging this and braiding it with other funding opportunities. The end of year balance is basically expected to be exactly what we're going to get transferred in at the end of the fiscal year once we close out the tax year and do that calculation. And then looking forward to fiscal years 26 and 27, we've got some bigger projects on our mind about how to use those funds. And if we were to, one of the open questions tonight would be if we leverage more income tax dollars to proceed with this project, that might tie our hands a little bit with some of the other projects that may come out of our 5-year planning process right now, or other desires to improve our parks and trails. So we're kind of trying to balance out how we spread those funds around the city. So the crux of our dilemma here is that we have a Natural Resources Trust Fund grant. That grant, we received the notification of award in December of 2022. And then it takes some time for the state to process their paperwork. We officially got the grant agreement in September of 2023. That timeline is expected for this grant program, so we knew it was going to take a while to get that grant agreement. But the project period for this ends at the end of August 2025. In June of this year, we received notification that we were awarded a grant from the Ingham County Trails and Parks Millage. However, the award is contingent on renewal of that millage in November of 2026, and funds would then be available in 2028. So we have to finish the project before August of next year for one grant, but can't start spending money from another grant until 4 years after that. So that is what we'd like to discuss with you all here tonight. We've outlined a couple of options. One would be that we defer the project until the county millage funds are available. In that situation, we would withdraw the Natural Resources Trust Fund grant from the state. I've received reassurance from our grant coordinator at the DNR that this is a great project. They'd be happy to have us apply for this again in the future. We'd look to reapply in 2027. One of the benefits of that is that the state has increased their maximum grant award amount from $300,000 to $400,000. But this is also contingent on renewage of the millage in 2026, which has been popular historically, but there's still a decision that has to be made by voters in 2026. The other option would be then to proceed with construction now, and instead of using the Trails and Parks millage funding, to pull the matching funds out of the income tax fund. So I'm happy to answer any other questions or hear your thoughts.
You're asking for the sense of the body?
Yes, please.
Does the city manager have thoughts?
A lot of thoughts.
Well, how about a recommendation? Do you have a recommendation on this?
Recommendation at this point is to delay this project and do a reapplication in 2027 for 2028 funding or project construction.
Correct.
With the potential of increased funding from the state may help absorb any price increases. We also may see availability and competitiveness of contractors reduce because other projects will be coming offline, and the impact that we're seeing on pricing will come down as a result of freeing up some of those contractors.
Questions from council? Yes, sir.
I have a question. So is this just a cash flow issue in the sense that if we proceeded with construction now, we would have to basically float the value of the Ingham County Trails grant until we got that money? No?
No, we would actually, we kind of have to make a choice here. So we would be spending that money either through income tax or general fund, and we would no longer be eligible for that Ingham County grant because we would be building the trail now before the grant technically is awarded to us.
Okay.
So when we do the blending of these grants to fund this particular project, and we've blended Ingham County grants with Natural Resource Trust Fund grants very successfully before, the issue that arose this year is that when everyone applied for this round of grants, we weren't aware, and I don't think the county was aware at the time, that there were going to be some funding restrictions for them, and that they were actually going to have to postpone all the grants to 2028. So we expected to hear back on this grant like we have with other grants in the same time frame, the same timeline, and that we would move forward with this grant, and we weren't hearing. And then when we did finally hear, that was the decision that was made. I think the county tried really hard to figure out ways to bridge all the gaps that they had, and this ultimately was the decision that they had to make. So this is contingent, so we can pull out our Natural Resources Trust Fund grant. We can say we're not going to move forward, reapply in 2027, which would align us with 2028 for the Ingham County grant. We would be eligible then for $400,000 instead of $300,000. I will say this this grant in the cycle that it was when we applied for it in that cycle, it was one of the highest rated grants that year in the state. So our grant administrator is pretty confident. Of course, it's a really good project, but we can't predict. We can give you a little bit of statistics as far as the Ingham County millage renewal. It's been up twice, and the first time I think it was about 55% approval, and the second time it was a 74% approval. So it has been a popular millage regionally, but again, we would have to wait until 2026, and as long as it's approved, then we would be getting that funding in 2028.
And to more directly answer, I think the question I hear about cash flow issues is, historically under the grant agreements, they will only reimburse expenses that are during that project period.
Yes.
And so, I haven't seen a grant agreement yet for the 2028 funding, but I would imagine it's the same thing where any expenses that took place before a certain date in 2028 would not be eligible.
Any other questions from council? Go ahead.
What does it look like if we say yes and then the millage doesn't pass?
We can look for other funding sources. We have some time, and I think that's something that we need to do regardless. I think that's something that we're pretty actively doing on all projects. So that's something, and we would also need to be planning ahead to say, you know, if that doesn't happen, we need to have additional income tax set aside potentially at that point, so.
And so the trail is the black mark, is that right?
Yes.
And then does it attach to the current trail?
Yeah, so it would, on the western side, it would connect onto Coolidge Road, and then on the eastern side, it would connect to the existing trail that kind of connects Azotica Park into the soccer complex. So it would meet right there.
So will you say that again a little slower? The first part about where it connects at the soccer complex.
At the soccer complex would meet where the existing Northern Tier Trail connects kind of at the northwest corner of Azotica Park into the soccer complex.
All right. And then where does it exit at on Coolidge? Like about where?
Are you familiar where the Willows? So if you're on Coolidge Road, you're going to go north of Abbey. As you're traveling north of Abbey, there's a wooded area there, and then you come up to the Willows. So it will be just on the south end of the Willows property. There's a retention basin there. It would come out right in that area.
Okay. And will it be lit? Not fun lit, but like light lit.
Likely not. I don't think that we have trail lighting on any of our trails, and we'd have to look at the requirements of these conservation easements as well to see what is permitted and not. But my initial review of those would suggest that trail lighting would not be permitted on the conservation easements.
All right. But it'll cut the walk that people make sometimes from Chandler Crossing to Coolidge Road if they're maybe coming from Meyer or Kroger.
Yes, certainly it would be a convenient way to access that. Those amenities, the other thing that we note is that, where it exits on Coolidge Road is really close to a lot of medical offices and a really important, access point there.
Yeah. And then the retirement places at Bircham, they could utilize it, as well, right?
Well, I think you're thinking of Bircham on Bircham Road, but there is Independence Village is over in that area. The Willows. There are various other facilities in that area that could access.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions? Yes.
I just really appreciate the income tax and the projects it has supported, as it's always a hot topic in the community about paying into that income tax and what it's being used for. So really appreciate that data.
I'll happily give you a lot more at budget time too.
Yeah, I love it. And congratulations.
Thank you.
Anything further? Okay. Mr. City Manager, we'll wait for your consideration of how you want to approach this from an agenda standpoint at some point in the future, if at all.
Mayor, I did have one more question.
Sure, go ahead.
Did the Parks and Rec weigh-in advisory committee, did they weigh in on this?
They weighed in right from the very beginning. They held the public hearings on this trail and sent this project to you, sent the original Natural Resources Trust Fund grant application, your way for approval, and have been in the loop on all of this. So we've given them updates concerning the Ingham County Trail and that we were coming to council to look for your input at this point because of the turn in funding.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 6.4, consideration of city manager performance evaluation form and process. As you could tell by my letter to you, pursuant to the city manager's contract, we have to establish a process for evaluation. He and I have worked together in the last, I guess it's been 3 or 4 weeks, to come up with a format, and Mr. Bellman's agreed to the format that I have attached here too, as well as the process. And I wanted you to all have a chance to review it. Subject to any discussion or questions or modifications tonight, it would be my intent that we submit this in the consent agenda next week, and then start the evaluation process, hopefully to have it done in terms of us within 30 days of the start of the process. So having said that, does anybody have any questions or comments or concerns or anything they want to change, modify, add, subtract to the form that's attached?
I was just wondering if we could put it as a business agenda item, just to make space for Councilmember Meadows. I don't know if he's given feedback. I haven't seen it if he has, but just to give him an opportunity to weigh in.
Fine with me. He has not responded to my letter or the attachment, but okay, that's fine. So we'll put it on the business agenda for the next meeting. Anything else on this? Okay, we move ahead to the next item on the agenda, which is a closed session. Does somebody have a motion with regard to this?
I have a motion, if you'll entertain it, Mayor. I would move that we enter closed session pursuant to MCL 15.268 sub 1 sub C to discuss strategy connected with the negotiation of a collective bargaining agreement.
I second the motion. We need a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Altmann?
Yes.
Councilmember Watson?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Singh?
Yes.
Mayor Brookover?
Yes. Okay, folks, we will go into closed session for a period of time. We will come back here to this venue to close the meeting. So, thank you. We don't need Bellman for this, so. Turned from closed session, do we have a motion?
I move that we enter open session.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Altmann,
Yes.
Councilmember Watson,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Singh,
Yes.
Mayor Brookover,
Yes. Could we have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Moved by Altman, seconded by
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, thanks, folks, for your time tonight.